This meeting of the Board of Trustees is called to order at 6:03 p.m. We have a quorum with Carlos Bustillos, Richard Cudier, Sotero Ramirez, Cruz Ochoa, Catherine Luceto, Mike Rosales, and myself. Trustee Rosales, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence?
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, with liberty and justice for all. Dr. Delatorre, will you lead us through the workshop this evening?
President Woodruff, members of the board, guests, our first presentation this evening comes from Gallagher, our health benefits advisor. At this time, I'd like to have him come forward.
Madam President, distinguished members of the board, Superintendent De La Torre, good evening. My name is Lou Arias. I'm with Gallagher Benefit Services out of Austin. And I'd like to thank you in advance for inviting me to come talk to you tonight and talk to you and give you an update on your health insurance fund. I believe you have the presentation there in front of you, so I'll go ahead and get started. So before we get started, I would like to go over the table of contents so that we're clear as to what we'll be speaking or touching upon. So the renewal estimates for 2020, and I'll go over some of the assumptions that our underwriters and our actuaries made when looking at those numbers. I'll go over the workup that we did for your medical plan, your pharmacy benefit manager or your RX plan, and then also your dental. We'll look at your current rates and your current benefits, and then we'll discuss what the next steps are. So the assumptions that we need to take into consideration is we use the revenue assumptions that were provided to us by Ysleta Independent School District. We use the same enrollment projecting forward to 2020, so we didn't anticipate a ton of migration. We are assume the same stop loss levels that we have today for 2020. It includes credit for pharmacy rebates, and that equates to approximately 1.7 million annually for YISD. In the numbers and the assumptions, we did not include any of the numbers for the special plan, which is that plan that's provided to folks who waive the coverage here at Ysleta, and it could be because they have coverage elsewhere. And we went ahead and included the increases for 2020, and these are estimated. The TPA fees, approximately 3%, and since you're self-funded, those are just the fees to administer the plan. Your current administrator or TPA is Aetna. The stop loss premium, approximately 20%. The stop loss, since you're self-funded, you guys have agreed to take the risk up to a certain amount, and then you purchase insurance. That's the insurance portion of the program that starts reimbursing the district once that limit's been met for each individual employee. We have what we call medical trend and pharmacy trend, and that's basically we take the last 12 months of claims that were paid last year, and we roll those forward into what those would have called paying them this year. And so basically, in a nutshell, that is medical inflation. So what a surgical procedure may have cost last year versus what it would cost this year, projecting forward. And so your medical trend is 6%, we assume 6%. And 7.7 on the pharmacy. When we went over the Aetna numbers, they're projecting just for their book of business for Ysleta is 4.7% on the medical and 11.9 on the pharmacy. And then we looked at your dental trend. You all are also self-funded. on your dental plan, and dental trend we are using the assumption of 5%. So having said that, let's go ahead and look at what your current benefits are today. So I have a chart here showing your medical rates and enrollment. It shows the amounts for Plan 1, Plan 2, Plan 3, and Plan 4. And then at the bottom, it shows what the district contributes towards the employee-only rate. You guys are currently contributing $434.42 across the board. For your other tiers, for example, if you're going to cover employee spouse or employee child or employee family, the difference between that $434.42 is what the employee contributes to add their dependents to the plan. If you look at the enrollment numbers, you'll see that the majority of your employees are on Plan 1. I'm sorry, Plan 2. And Plan 1 has 144. Plan 2 has 1715. Plan 3, 778. And Plan 4, 1,074. So across the board for all plans, 3,711. And then you have the additional tiers there. We go all the way to the right, and you have a total of what I call belly buttons. We count belly buttons of 5,000, just a little under or a little over 5,000 employees enrolled across the board. So let's also look at your current dental rates and enrollment. The contributions for employee only are $19.03. And then you have the tiers if you're starting to add your dependents. So through March of 2019, we had a total of 2,500 employees, 337 spouses, 780 when you add the children. Family coverage 545 for a total of 4,163 enrolled on the dental plan. And again, this is your self-funded dental plan. So what we did is we took all of those numbers, the current enrollment, considering the same plan designs, considering all the assumptions we made on your stop loss, medical trend, and stop loss, and we did a workup, an underwriting workup. And so if you look at, on the top, I do have the total of medical employees. Again, it matches the 5,013 enrolled. The 2020 projections, if we look at claims, currently you're at 765.83 PEPM per employee per month. The annual cost is $46 million, just right at $46 million. Your fixed cost, again, you're self-insured, so those are your fees that you pay for your TPA to administer the plan. Your fixed costs are at $127.87. Again, this is PEPM for a total of $7.6 million. If we add the PEPM up for your claims, your fixed cost, it comes up to $893.70 per employee per month, or a total of $53,761,417. We did include your rebates, and I talked about that on the prior page. We assumed 1.7 from the prior year that it would be coming back to the district. So if we take that 1.7, the net cost is $52,053,109. Your contributions from Ysleta equate to $42,305,349. That was for fiscal year 18 and 19. So with those numbers, the rate action with your rebates, meaning what you would need to keep the plans exactly the same, assuming your contribution and everything stays the same, would be a 23% increase over what you pay today. The same thing is the same workup we did on the dental, because it is a self-funded dental plan. $34.18. Your fixed costs are $2. Your total is $36.19 per employee per month. The contributions are 533,127. And then you times the number of lives, you're looking at a 23.3% increase on your self-funded dental plan. Before I get into this slide, let me go back real quick. Before I get into the history and where we got these numbers and kind of creating a story as to where we are today, as you're looking at the difference in your annual claims cost and where you need to be now, there's only two things that you can do to help make up ground. And the first one is to make plan changes to the plan. And the second thing is to consider changing your contribution strategy. I believe I was here back in October and we ran through something very similar, and you heard me say something very similar to what I'm saying today, is that it's been a while since you've had some plan changes. I think it was 2014, and the contribution strategy has remained the same. And every year you see that medical trend and that pharmacy trend tacked on to your current claims. The claims are the claims. I mean, they're going to do what they're going to do. On top of that, you're looking at the trend, which is your medical inflation. So by not making any changes or plan changes, that continues to grow, and eventually it starts to put you in a little bit of into a deficit, quite frankly. And so that's what I wanted to let you know, is that in order to make an impact to those are the two things that you guys have to consider to be able to make up some ground. So how did we get to where we're at now? So we're looking at your claims history for medical and pharmacy. And again, this does not include the special plan nor the dental on this particular slide. If you look at the annual claims per employee, you know that on the previous sheet, we try and calculate your claims, your fixed cost, and on a per employee per month basis. This here will show you what it costs the employee annually. So back in 2016, your employees on Plan 1 were costing you $10,240 each as far as claims go. And if we go down the line, you'll see that it continues to grow. If you look at 2017, it's $13,000. 2018, it stays about the same, but then going into 2019 through February, you're at about $20,610. And then I go by plan, continuing those dollar amounts. If you go all the way to the right, that gives you the average across all the plans. So in 2016, each employee was spending approximately $6,000. 2017, $7,000. 2018, $8,000. And this year through February, as far that we have claims for, you're just under $9,000. We look at the history of your fund balance, and this graph here it kind of shows a big dip down in 2014, and then it starts to make an upward climb. I said earlier, that's when you made a plan change, and so your claims started to improve and go back in the upward direction. But if we look at fiscal year 2019, your fund balance was $4.5 million. I won't go through every single year there, but I'll go through 2017 to current, $2.5 million, and then 2018, $4.1. And for 2019 through February, your fund balance is currently at $1.3 million. And again, I put a footnote there, is that you implemented Plan 2 and Plan 4 back in 2014, and that's when you start to notice that you started to see your fund balance start to take a turn for the better in an upward trend. Right now, if you look at 2014 headed to 2019, it's starting to come back down again. Again, no contribution strategy changes and no significant plan changes to help keep up with medical trend, and then of course your claims. Your current medical benefits, as they are today, again, nothing's changed. Plan 1 still has a $500 deductible, very rich plan, and rightfully so. School districts tend to have rich benefits. So you have Plan 1 has a $500 deductible, 80% coinsurance. You have the appropriate copays for your office visits, and then you also have your copays for your pharmacy. And again, this has been administered through Aetna and their network. Plan 2, you have I don't have my glasses on, a $500 deductible also for Plan 2, 80% coinsurance. Plan 3, $1,000 deductible, 80% coinsurance. And then you have Plan 4, which is a $3,000 deductible, 100% coverage. But you don't have very many folks enrolled in that particular plan. And so if you look at the bottom, you'll see Plan 2 has the majority of the enrollment. Plan 4, you do have 1,400. And Plan 1 is 175. And the reason you won't see that many people on that more rich plan is that because it's so rich, the employees have to contribute a little bit more in order to have a better benefit. So the change required, all said and done, for 2020, assuming all the assumptions I just made, and assuming that we keep the plans and contributions the same, is that for 2020, we need to come up with $9.7 million or 23% over 2019, going into 2020. So the next steps, now that we know where the fund balance is, now that we know where your claims are trending, your contributions, and what actions, what the action needs to take place in order to come up with that difference, that shortfall, we need to decide on what the 2020 contributions are going to be. We are going to bid the stop loss in 2020. That's something that we do every year. You don't necessarily bid out your TPA services every year because it's a fixed cost, but we do bid out your stop loss, which is the actual insurance portion, and that'll be bid out for RFP in 2020. We'll market the medical, the RX, or your pharmacy benefit manager, and then again your stop loss for 2021. We'll review the plan designs and then also contributions during that exercise for 2021 as well. So those are the next steps that need to take place, or discussions that need to take place now that we know what the impact is and what needs to the 23% and where we need to catch up on that $9.7 million.
Can I make some comments?
Sure.
I've been doing this for 32 years, in HR for almost 8 years. I have never seen a 23% increase in a year. That's unheard of. That's the first. The second is, are you saying that of the $52 million we pay every year, $8 million go to our TPA?
So to answer your first question or your comment, Ysleta this year is having a particularly not so great year when it comes to claims. You also made the decision when we marketed the stop loss to take on a little bit more risk in exchange for a lower premium to help offset rates last year.
Right.
And you take all that in a combination along with your pharmacy and rebates, 23% is high.
Unheard of.
Some of my other districts are not too far behind you. But like I said, with being self-funded, you're gonna have your peaks and valleys. You may go 5 years with great experience or somewhat great experience, and then that bad year is gonna come.
Oh, I understand that, but you're projecting on one bad year then moving into the future.
Yes, sir. And like I said, you do have some high-cost claimants.
This year, this past year.
Correct.
And the $7,692,148 that are fixed, that's made up of the TPA and the stop loss?
That's correct. It's going to be your.
How much of that is going to Aetna?
All of that. They carry the stop loss and the TPA, the services.
So as the health benefits advisors, your advice might be to go out for an RFP to find someone other than Aetna?
We thought we were going to kick out an RFP this last year. The decision was made to wait until 2021. I believe there was a survey, an employee survey. Employees were happy with the benefits. They didn't have any complaints. Of course, the flip side to that is what it cost.
I'm sure Aetna's happy with the benefits too.
And then the decision was to go ahead and not put the medical out to bid until 2021. Stop loss will go out every year. Correct.
That's nuts. Okay.
Unless there's any other questions, that's all I have for you today. Again, we do, there's that uncomfortable decision or discussion that needs to be made about what do we do next.
Yeah, we'd like to take your lead. You're the health benefits advisor, and I think acknowledging that we either have to do a plan design change or contribute more to the plan isn't all that fascinating.
Not. Because to make up, and I have this
I gotta
discussion
come up with that.
when I've had a discussion with all my school districts, we're not talking about changing copays. If we change a copay here and a copay there, you're chasing your,
Yeah, I understand.
your nickels and dimes. You're talking about deductibles, coinsurance, or something a little different. Plan designs itself. There's all kinds of the new acronyms that come out. We've heard them all over the last 20 years: PPOs, HMOs, EPOs, ACOs. Those can be very rich benefits, and they can stay rich benefits. But they're a little bit more restrictive and a little more tightly managed in exchange for those rich benefits. And then you have the contribution strategy.
what would be your recommendation then? Would it be to go out and find a new plan or just stick with the plan?
Well, I think at this point, for right now, it's a little too late to go out for the RFP on your medical and pharmacy, considering we probably should have done that this last fall in 2018. You have, I believe, 1 more year left on your Aetna contract. And the plan is to go out this fall and put it out to market with the stop loss, and then and then also take out the medical TPA services. Recommendation, quite honestly, is to look at your contribution strategy and plan changes.
By contribution strategy, you mean increasing either the employee contribution or the employer contribution?
Correct. Yes, sir.
With the things being equal and no movement, the 23% increase, what does that look for us, the way we have it set up now?
If you leave it exactly the way you have it now, you're short $9.7 million.
No, I understand that.
Mm-hmm.
But you equate it back to numbers, people that we have, the plan have you factored that out? The 9 million, we got so many people and we contribute, they contribute.
So that's the uncomfortable discussion that needs to take place, right? Is we know what the number is, and we know how many employees are here, and we know what the district contributes. And so the uncomfortable conversation is when we talk about a contribution strategy, who's going to pick up the bulk of it or all of it?
How many claims hit that stop loss this
I
year
can
versus
check.
the last year?
So we are in the month of July. You're not at your what we anticipated you would hit. As far as the number of hit that you would hit, but you did have some, and so you're receiving. I can get the exact number of claims that you've hit, that have hit stop loss, and how much of that money has been reimbursed over the. Correct. Now, keep in mind, it's good. The numbers are going to be different because last year you had a lower spec in exchange for, again, some lower premium.
Yeah. So we're looking, okay. So we'd be looking at 1,900 total?
So if we take the 9.5 million divided by 5,000 members, it's roughly 1,900 per member
Per member.
contributions. Now, we're not
Correct.
talking about plan 1, 2, 3, or 4. It's just
Across the
per
board,
member,
yeah.
$1,900 is the
Of
average.
which we picked up some.
Typically, the district pays 75% más o menos of the annual contributions, and employees pay 25%.
Now, is it typical to just base it off a 12-month period rather than a 3-year period, 5-year period, understanding that these things tend to happen in cycles?
Yeah, the norm is to run it off a rolling 12 months. And so, for example, we go back where we're at now, go back 12 months, and that's what the underwriters will look at. The reason we don't go back too far back is some of those bad claims that you had maybe last year, year before, have rolled off, and they're no longer a factor. And then some of the ones that were healthy around then may have some issues this year. So we look at 12 months. You don't just look at the claims. You look at the diagnosis and the prognosis. So you look at, okay, if we have, and I'm just going to use as an example, a cancer patient that's receiving cancer services. Where are they in that plan of treatment? Are they at the very beginning? And so how many months or years do you project forward with what they think that particular diagnosis is going to cost? Are they in the middle of it, or are they at the tail end? And they'll take all of that into consideration when calculating that number. For every month that we move this along forward, so this was through February, so we'll get March and April claims soon. So that's an additional 2 months. That'll drop off 2 months on the back end.
Front end. Uh-huh.
On the right.
We pick up claims in the summer, don't we?
Typically, claims do tend to for school districts. They do because folks have more time to utilize their benefits.
Yeah, but those claims are routine checkups.
They're
and
routine,
things
you're
like
right.
that. They're not unexpected.
If you take out, if you were to remove, you may have heard this or not, but 80% of your claims cost typically comes from about 5 to 10% of the employees. It's a small number of employees that tend to drive the cost. Sometimes you have the opposite, where I've got another district that doesn't have very many that have, or at all, that have hit the spec or even half, but they're aggregate. They've got a lot of people floating around 90,000 to 100, and so their aggregate is higher than high claimants. For Ysleta, if you remove the high claimants, you're not running bad, but you do have some high claimants that are costing you some money.
Is there a spreadsheet or anything like that, that without naming the
We can
person,
de-identify it for
we
you.
could get categories of what we've seen this year, the last 12 months, 18 months, that we
Yes, sir.
didn't experience prior to that, that kept our health benefits flat?
Yes, sir.
Okay. 23% is a lot.
Is there anything that any of your other districts are doing differently that's innovative, that's maybe not going to kill the district with so much money and contribution, or adding so much to our teachers or employees to have to add to their contribution?
There are. There's always new plan designs. Like I said, there's two things, right? It's either contributions, and that's painful for everybody, district and employees. So if you look at plan designs, and when we talked about not, we're not talking about copays. You talk about, you're looking at the current enrollment on some of the plans that you have. And do you really need to have that many if the majority are on 3? The other question would be, you have the broadest network, which allows employees a great amount of choice, and that's what everybody would like, right? I mean, Aetna has a very large network. Some of the things that other folks in Austin, San Antonio, and some of the other major metropolitan areas are doing, similar to way back when there were HMOs. They're not HMO lookalikes, but they're what they call accountable care organizations, and the plans can either stay the same or even improve, where you have a richer benefit, a lower deductible, higher coinsurance, but you sacrifice the choice. It's a smaller network. It's maybe not every hospital in town, but they give you a really big discount in exchange for that. And then they're also sharing the risk with you.
So the example would be, and this is just for illustrative purposes, if you directed everybody to Providence, they'd have greater leverage with Providence to reduce the price, because you'd basically guarantee that every employee and their family in the district ends up at Providence rather than having Del Sol or University Medical Center as an option. People don't like that because people develop relationships with their docs and don't want to be directed to any one provider or any one doctor.
The other piece to that
Is that
would
right?
be, the other piece with that is that you would also hold whichever hospital it is, because they are going to get all the steerage, is if they tell you, okay, we're going to go from this discount to this discount, well, you have to prove it. You have to share in the risk. If you don't hit the target, the school district gets the money back. If they do hit the target and save you money, then there's also some sharing.
The hospital would get the additional money. If you hit the
You
target, then
there's a
you
split.
save whatever you come in under, because you're
Ysleta
self-funded.
would get some of that money, and the hospital would do it for managing and accounting, being accountable to your care organization.
But even with that, even if we, again, for the illustrative purposes, even if we do something like that,
Illustrative.
they would still have the ability to do out of network, right? Depending on what.
So
plan
yes
we
and
would
no.
do.
So you have two models. You can go straight ACO. And so in the example we used earlier with Providence and their affiliated doctors, a straight ACO would mean Providence only and their affiliated doctors. There is no out of network. The other option that carriers can do is they can tier it and say, okay, we'll create a plan that has, right now you have an in-network and out-of-network, and we'll put the ACO in front of the benefits, make that the rich benefit. The rich benefit creates the steerage to send people in that direction, but since the hospital knows that the employees can still go to their competitors down the road, the discount is not as great as if it was straight, but it is greater than the broad network. So you can have both.
Are you also able to provide us with numbers or percentages of our employees and their families that currently go to one of the 3 major providers, so we can see what that pie looks like?
Sure, we have data that we can collect to show you where the majority of your employees tend to go to, or which hospitals they favor over the other, for whatever reason.
I appreciate that. Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Ms. Champagne's with us this evening. If anyone has any questions relative to recent audit reports or the audit plan that you're about to present, as I understand it. The floor is yours, Ms. Champagne.
Thank you. Good evening, board president, board members, and superintendent. Can you hear me better? And good evening, everybody. Before I start, I would like to introduce my new staff, Octavio Bustillos. He's right there. He joined us early June, so this is his second week. Thank you. I did not make more printouts of the package that I sent out last Friday. So I would share with you, go over the PowerPoint with you all. I do have one small change that I just got advice from Mr. Ochoa this evening before this, so I had 15 copies.
Thank you. I'm sure.
When I reach there, I will tell you. Okay. So for our audit plan, we continue to strive for the mission that we had shared with everybody. We try to provide fair, objective, and added value audit services to everybody. By doing so, that we want to introduce to you a brief history of our department. I started in 2002, March 4th, so 234 that I remember with the district. This one, we followed the House Bill 1854, so all of our audit work papers are out of the open record request. I want to mention this just to show you that how serious we take confidentiality. So the auditees, whatever they share with us, they can be open-minded and they can be open with us about through process, whether it's perfect or not perfect, we document it. And then the report will go to all the board members and superintendent at the same time. And this one is also demonstrated in our local policy, CFC local. Our office have myself, and we have a staff auditor too, Fernando. We have a new staff. I just introduced to you, Octavio, and we have Gino. I have 1.5 part-timers. Daniel is graduated already. He's leaving us end of June. Marcela just joined us about a month old. So if you know somebody who has principal accounting 1 and 2, you're very welcome to introduce, but they have to have GPA more than 3.25 and have to pass a quiz and a case study to join us. Our case study is very challenging. And then we have a secretary, Dolores, with us for many years. We did have a bond auditor, but the project is going to end, the contract is going to end of June. So our objective, like I say, we try to ensure during the audit, we don't really do many other districts say only do school fundraising audit. When we do audit, we try to make sure the process we understood, we will communicate from and to the department or the school that we audit to make sure that we consider the operation, we consider the assets is secured, and we also look at compliance. So it's more a comprehensive approach rather than just targeted one area at a time. And the way we do this is we're going to share with you about the methodologies. We treat all the cases, we follow federal, state, board policy, try to make sure that we apply the principles, the policies, the procedures equally to all the cases. And I do borrow from academic that we also practice the PLC, and we do prudent, we do legal, we do cost-effective process on those. What we try to do, like I just say, we try to make sure the policy and procedures are well understood. We well communicated to each other, and we make sure all our audit findings has the data to back it up. either it's compliance or it's not compliance. If the process is not perfect, we'll come back, we'll communicate to the central office to make sure that central office could also reconsider, revamp, so the process can be better serving the schools, the departments. So the goal is to make sure our students and teachers have a very good support from workflow to transaction process to finalizing everything. Okay. Now the cycle we have is we do prepare, we do research, we do inquiries, we walk through, we talk to auditees to make sure we understand. We do some data analysis before we head out to the school departments. When we do in the field work, we make sure we ask for documentations that we could not find from our financial system backup or from our student system backup. So I really appreciate our associates are very supportive that throughout the years that we centralized all the documentation backups. If we could have it backup in Munis, that's our financial system, or in the e-school, that's our student system, then we do not ask campus or try not to ask campus to have spreadsheet or extra copies, all these things. For example, like if we already have the special ed had lab students backup documentation is already in YISD software, then when we do audit, we don't ask the school to show us their hard copy because it's already have a process. Central office guided, train the schools, and they help schools to make sure they know how to use the software. They know how to have the software processed into the system. That's our philosophy. So whatever the district has the approach, then audit is to reinforce the process so that we don't have duplicate effort. That's the way we try to enforce with. And now, of course, we take effective dates into consideration. For example, if the central office say from 2014 that everybody needs to do A, B, C, then we do not criticize or we do not say this is an audit finding if that process was in 2013. Okay. In the reporting side, we make sure all the audit exceptions well communicated to the staff level. I started with the staff level. If it's, for example, if it's attendance coding issue, we make sure whoever was assigned at campus level or the department level, that staff and my staff communicate well, knows why it was an exception. And before we issue audit report, I make sure I make a call or email the principal or the director to see, okay, we had this. And usually it's not last minute communication. It might look like I do a last minute call, but it's well communicated before I make the call. And then the associates, I try not to bother you too much. So probably you do see the audit report. If it's the situation that I really could not resolve at the campus or department level, then I would go to the associate level to make sure they know what's coming up. Then we issue audit report, and every audit has 6 weeks for the director or the principal to work out a corrective action plan. In this 6 weeks, if things are addressed, meaning if there was some documentation error, they corrected, or there was some new procedures put in place, then we have the status reported to you all. And then within 6 months to 1 year, we do a follow-up audit to make sure that the corrective action plan has been implemented, to make sure whether the implementation really work as it's supposed to be. If there was still exceptions, then we'll make a note there to say the exception is still noted and continue to monitor is needed. I have some feedback from your evaluation, so I will move up the follow-up rather than 6 months to 1 year. I would move it as much close to 6 months as possible. The communication, we are very open door communication, and we do have a hotline for everybody to complain, report professionally, and our process, I think we're pretty fair. My secretary look up and listen to the recorded message every morning. If there was one, we base on the caller's wish, either remain anonymous or not anonymous. If they do left the name, then I will call back to the caller report whatever the results are. If not, then we make sure during our audit, similar situation will be taken care of. And then we do have I appreciate that in the new employee orientation it allowed me to do a brief introduction of the internal audit functions to everybody, to the new employees. And then every year about May, I have those who audited give a feedback to you all about what they feel about the audit. Now, for the new audit plan, the risk assessment process, you have in the package, I have removed 2 more judgmental criteria for last year. So this year, the 7 criteria, everything is backed up by number. Last year's audit results, district image reflection. This one impacts, we take student numbers, staff numbers, and we also look at transactions. We look at audit exceptions. We look at how long this audit has been audited. We look at financial transaction quantity, dollar amounts, frequencies. So every of those is backed up with the numbers, and that's in the spreadsheet that you received. Now, with the audit resource allocation, since we have very limited number of staff and I have a very young group of staff, so I plan to have 17% of the 226 days available for the training, and 15% of those will be expected some of administrative staff. Sometimes it's an office discussion or their time off because they do have 10 days by design. Then 68% of those are the audit hours. So those are the available structure we have. So with the summary of the upcoming scope is pretty much similar to, we have a construction facility, we have program function audits, we have ADA PIMS. This one, we would like to do high school, middle school by level, so you can see an overall picture of how this area is done. Cash management audit, we have provided you with high schools level, and we started to do middle school. I think I just sent them email about 2 weeks ago, so I apologize. It was a bad timing because it was close to year end. I will improve on that. And then we do have some campus audits. Since I gave you the draft, we have increased from 10 something to 23, I think. So this is a list you can see. I don't know if you can see well. So here we have the big items. And in this one, you can see we already up to 23 exit audits. The scopes, I think this is similar to what I continue. So the follow-up area, we also have hotline investigation and the overall tracking. This analysis, I appreciate it. Associates gave me this opportunity, so we'll provide you with every school, every teacher for last school years, how timing they are taking attendance. Because by requirement, every school is supposed to set an accounting period to take attendance. That is a snapshot. But everybody say it's impossible. So I asked around other school districts. So the range is from 0 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes tolerance, kind of grace period for teachers to take attendance. So I will provide some analysis of 5 minutes and 10 minutes for associates to review with the principals in August meeting. We have been carried 15 minutes grace period, but from the training I went to, it seems to be larger than TEA would allow, because they would not give us a concrete answer. They only say, well, by requirement, it's a snapshot. It's not a period of time that you can take attendance. Now, the attendance affects the funding greatly because everything is based on the attendance, how much we get funding. So I think we would like to take this opportunity to share with everybody of how we are doing and how we can improve it. And then on the current year's summary, we were able to do 59 projects, which include 33 campuses, 6 in academic areas, 6 in finance area, 12 in operations, and 2 in superintendent's office. And I'm sorry, Bobby, we didn't do any HR. And we had 34 hotline cases reported to you all. With that said, we really appreciate all of your support, and with everybody's cooperation, we're a wonderful district. I always tell the new employees, this district is wonderful. Our teachers work harder than any other school district's teachers. Our principals are so available, very appreciated by all the parents, and central office support is really, really here to support all the departments and all the schools. So, and I'm very honored and happy that I can be part of the supporting group. I know nobody likes to see me, but they always give me a big hug and they always give me a smile. So I really appreciate the working relationship with every teacher that I came across. Sometimes it's not that pleasant, but I think they all give me the great support, and I really appreciate. I would like to, I forgot to mention about the communication I just passed to you. If you guys don't have any question, or tomorrow after the vote, and I would like to send this reminder to all the associates and super, how we communicate with everybody. Basically, just wrap up how we will do audit, the timing of audit, and the audit, and on the back is the audit format. What kind of section will be included in the audit report? Yes.
I just had one quick question on the audit that you mentioned about attendance.
Yes.
And timely taking of attendance, one of the projects you're going to be taking on. Are you going to be looking at missed attendance where students are marked incorrectly absent or present? Because truthfully, that's where the money's tied. It's not tied into what minute the attendance is taken. It's whether a student is actually present when they're being marked present, or whether they're being marked absent when they're actually there. So you are going to be looking at that?
Yes.
Okay.
Both, okay? So the ADN and PIN verification, that's the part that you mentioned about if the students are coded correctly or not. So in the funding portion of the students or the attendance, the student membership with attendance, weighted ADA is the basic funding. Then we have a special coding, special ed students, lab students, transportations, by mileage, by areas, and we also have other areas of funding, tier 1, tier 2, and we have, I mentioned special ed, the federal funding, all these things, that's part based on coding. But teacher taking attendance, if we get audited by TEA and say your class has 22 students, you take your class accounting period for your course, for your school is 9:30. You take attendance at 9:50. This auditor could exclude your attendance, means you have no students funded for that day. So it's not just coding only. It's really serious about timing also, because the accounting period is set at that time. For secondary schools, our policy is set 20 minutes into second instructional hour, usually fall into second period. So we do look at every school differently based on their instructional belt, not what time they start it. Because some of the school they start with peanut butter, the breakfast time, that doesn't count instructional. So we do take that into consideration.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do we have other questions?
Champagne,
Yes.
it's probably not a fair question because we're still trying to figure out everything the legislature did to us. Was there any changes to the internal audit as far as policy or procedure that the legislature introduced in the session we just wrapped up?
Not that I know of. The risk assessment I put in place is based on the budget I received in May from budget department, and I think I was told that it wasn't much change or was not finalized. So I think I was consistent to use that number to do the risk assessment. According about the internal audit functional reporting, I have not heard anything yet.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think we're going to take a brief recess, about 10 minutes for a health break. Thank you. Thank you. I do. There it is. No, I can't hardly do it. We reconvene our meeting at 7:08. Dr. Delatorre, we can continue with our reports.
President Woodruff, members of the board, at this time, we'll begin our conversation discussion around a proposed 2019-20 budget and compensation plan. At this time, I'd like to invite the president of the Ysleta Teachers Association, Mrs. Arlinda Valencia, to come forward and share some thoughts with the Board of Trustees.
Good evening, Board of Trustees, Madam President, and Dr. De La Torre. I'm real excited today because we're going to hear about the salaries. I know a lot of you are here to hear about the salaries. I have to tell you that we have an outstanding salary proposal to show you tonight and share with you. And I have to thank Dr. De La Torre, Ms. Lindley, and Bobby Russell Garcia. Thank you so much. They really helped out on us coming to an agreement as to how we wanted to do this. But first, let me just mention a couple of things a lot of you may not know. The legislature passed House Bill 3. And I'm trying to, how do I get this to work? Thank you. That's how you do it. I just wanted to go through this really quick. House Bill 3 gave Ysleta, or we're getting with Ysleta, our ADA, that's daily attendance. And before I get away from that number, 37,107 students, I know we have more than that, but it's the attendance that drives it. So when Champagne was up here talking about PEAMS and getting the attendance done at exactly 9:20, I remember before, I remember when I was teaching, that just drove me crazy. It had to be done at 9:20. And if it wasn't, we would get in trouble. And I was always the one getting in trouble. So, without looking and understanding it, I think that the people that are here need to go back and say, they're not doing it just to be mean. We have to do it because this drives the money that Ysleta gets. So please forward that. Forward that and tell people you've got to get your attendance in. But with the attendance that the state had, we got a total gain of $32 million. That's for House Bill 3. And the allotment for salaries was 11.3. 75% of that allotment goes to teachers, nurses, librarians, and counselors. And then 25% of it goes to hourly, which was close to 2.8 million. That's the minimum. And I have to tell you that Ysleta went way beyond. Next slide. If you notice, here you have the salary schedule, and it shows you what people will be making. This is a really good salary. How many, those in the audience right now, you've not gotten this type of money in years. So we're very fortunate that we're getting this money. Now, I'd like you to look from 0 to 5. 0 to 5 is not included in House Bill 3. And neither are administrators. So if we were going just specifically with what House Bill 3 mentioned, then the 0 to 5 wouldn't have gotten a raise, and neither would administration. But this administration said, no, we have to compensate everyone. So those new teachers coming in and have experience from 1 to 5 are going to receive $26.10 for the rest of the year. And now that's more than $200 a month. That would help. Then from 6 to 18, you're going to be making $3,065. Those are your mid people, the people in the middle. Then, of course, the experience are at the end, and that's what House Bill was all about. House Bill 3 was about experience. They wanted the teachers with experience to get the most money, and that's exactly what this district did, and I appreciate that. Next. Let's the administrators, they don't have to have this raise, but administration thought, you know what, if we have to compete with Socorro and we have to compete with El Paso for our administrators, we better stay up with them, and they're each getting 5%. So we're very happy that the administration is being taken care of also. Okay? This excites me too. The salary proposal for ancillary paraprofessionals, the hourly people, we are getting 6.5%, 6.5. That is we haven't heard that in years. In fact, I don't even remember ever getting past a 6%. And hourly is getting 6.5%. And all these pay grades, I may have left some out, but they're all going to get, the hourly are going to get 6.5. We talked about last month, we talked about specialized aides that were classified as 3, and they do a lot of restraining, and we wanted them to go to level 4. We talked to administration. They said, if you move them to level 4, it's gonna cost $1,600 more a year to pay them. But then they cannot move them around as they would like. So instead, we compromised. They're getting $1,600 as a stipend. And that is awesome compared to the 6.5% that they're getting, plus they're gonna get $1,600. And plus, we have a whole list. If those that have the proposal, you'll see the list of other people that are getting stipends increases. So we're very, very excited about that. So at Christmas, I threw this in at the very end today, and I appreciate Dr. De La Torre helping me out on this. But I thought, $450, can we make it $5? And he did. I appreciate it. Every little bit helps. $50 more is going to help. So I do thank him for that. At the very last, I was just like, see? So thank you, Dr. De La Torre. And go to the next page. Trying to get, there you go. These are the stipends that are special stipends that are going to be approved. And then we have this one. This is what I'm really excited about. YTA and YISD, continuing to work for a common cause for a better tomorrow. We're moving on up, and I think this is a beautiful graphic. It shows how we are building. Let me compare this salary proposal to what you're hearing from the other districts. And I'm hearing it from a lot of districts. What they're doing, because they don't sit and think about how to do this, they're just going, let's give everybody a 5. And then the legislature said, you have to differentiate from experienced teachers. And they're going, let's just throw them $1,000. How about that? Let's throw them $1,000 and we'll be differentiating. That's not what Ysleta did. Ysleta is putting all the money into salary. That $1,000 or $250 or $750 that you hear other districts are throwing in at the end, that is not helping the teachers because it does not go on their salary. They can't count it on their retirement. This salary is going totally on their salary schedule. And that is a huge, huge thing for Dr. De La Torre and his team to offer us. So thank you very, very much. With all of this package, it just looks fantastic that all of the money that we have is going to salaries. It's going to the Christmas bonus or stipend. And then we're also increasing other stipends too. So if the board votes for this, we will love you. That's all we can say, right? Thank you very much.
Ms. Connie, may I make a, Arlinda? I just want to say a couple of words. What you just said in terms of doing the work. I've been here 5 years, and in those 5 years, I constantly applaud the administration, starting with Dr. La Torre. And again, please understand, I look at it from a very professional point of view. But these are the kinds of people that do things right, correct.
That's correct.
And whatever else happens out in the other districts, it doesn't measure with the fact that we have the people and the capability and the willingness to look after our people. Because ultimately, the teachers are our main responsibility, well, not above, but along with our kids. Yet this administration is constantly diligent and willing to work things out with you guys. And thank God for those guys in Austin gave us enough money to do all this. But I feel honored and humbled to be around these kinds of caliber of people. And I say that to you directly, and I say that publicly. And no, I say,
No,
and I hope you buy.
you're right, you're
I hope
right.
you get Dr. La Torre a gift for Christmas by all means. Please.
Oh, yes, yes, of course we will, right? We'll get him a gift, a very nice gift. I just wanted to tell you that it's always been a pleasure to work with Dr. De La Torre and his team. They're teacher-friendly, and they don't want, remember, just like I said in the presentation, Ysleta is the gold standard. No one can beat Ysleta. Any other questions? Yes.
I really don't have a question. I just wanted to kind of say what Mike said, is that we appreciate Dr. De La Torre, his staff, for working with you all. Because every individual that's here in this list, when we went to the legislative body, where we sat there for 5 hours when brain dead, it couldn't translate to what we see today. We know there was money coming and everything else, but this is a nice breakdown. And I have kids in school, and I appreciate each employee that's there, and who feeds them, who mentors them, who transports them, the teachers, the counselors. I mean, it is just a fantastic. I'm so amazed how our schools work independently, but still work with each other. Kids going to practice, kids going to football, everything. I mean, it's just amazing. So I am so happy that this was worked out, that we came out with a good budget, that and I'm saying because the state put this up there, okay? So that really helps, and it should go to the teachers and everybody else that's working. And the admin, I mean, they put in hard work too. They stay there almost 24 hours sometimes, I think, because of all the commitments they have to be monitoring everything that's happening. But anyway, I just want to thank you, Dr. De La Torre, the staff, and your teachers for everything that you've done to promote Ysleta. I am so proud to be on this board, and I'm proud that my kids go to this school district. So thank you.
Thank you.
I just had one quick comment. Arlinda, you don't have to stand up there because you're not going to answer anything, don't worry. But the one thing that really made me happy, and the one thing I told Arlinda when I met with her is we need to take care of our hourly people. And that's usually the forgotten people. Those are the ones that it's very easy to sweep them under the rug and say, here's a 2% raise and forget about them because they're not being protected by the state. And so I am incredibly grateful to Dr. De La Torre and his staff and for Arlinda and everybody that they prioritize them, because 6.5% raise for a family that lives paycheck to paycheck is a huge, huge difference for them. And at $1,600 for our paraprofessionals who work with our most delicate students is incredibly needed. So I am grateful from somebody who has a family that has somebody with disabilities and works with people that have disabilities. I am incredibly grateful that you all took care of them, because they are often the forgotten people. And so I appreciate that our district values them so much.
Now, the real mastermind behind all of this, Miss Lindley Leeper, working with Bobby and Miss Chacon, Susan Austin, some of us, and the folks at YTA, they're the ones that came up with this great proposal. And so I'll let her talk to you from her perspective.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, and Dr. De La Torre. I was hoping I might be able to take these off, but I can't, and see the screen. So our agenda this evening is to briefly talk about HB3, to review the compensation plan, although our Linda has now stolen the thunder, and to go over the operating budget. So as you know, HB3 was signed into law last Tuesday by the governor. And before I go into the great things that the law includes, I want to talk briefly about some of the things that were taken out of our current funding model. So as you know, we lost the cost of education index. They've also materially changed our tax rate. The voters had approved through a tax ratification election an M&O, or maintenance and operations rate, of $1.17 per $100 of valuation. That has been reduced in this next fiscal year to just slightly under $1.07. And next year will be reduced again to $1.05. In terms of what does that mean to us in money, roughly $3.8 million more will come out of the budget next year. So we'll lose another almost $4 million in revenue next year by this tax rate compression. The gifted and talented and high school allotments were both eliminated, but we still need to maintain the programs. And then the transportation funding model was changed from a linear density model to an actual mileage model. On the good side, everybody knows we got an increase in the basic allotment on the ADA from $51.40 to $61.60. There's a new state compensatory education weight based on census blocks that helps address socioeconomic differences. New weights were added for dyslexia, early education, and dual language, and CTE was expanded to include 7th and 8th grades. We're required under the new law to provide full-day pre-K for all qualified students. We anticipate the cost to be around $4.5 million, and it should be funded through the new early education allotment. And as you heard Ms. Valencia say, the compensation increases were mandated at 30% of the increase. The increase is about $30 million, so 30% of $30 million is around $9 million. 75% of that must go to full-time teachers, nurses, librarians, and counselors, while the remaining 25%, or about $2.2 million, would be dedicated to other non-administrative full-time district employees, which does include your paraprofessionals and your ancillary or hourly employees. So she's already told you then that steps 0 through 5 on the teacher, nurse, and librarian scale would receive a 5% increase. Those at step 6 through 18, a 5.5% increase, while those at step 19 or above would receive a 6% increase. Paraprofessionals and ancillary, a 6.5%, while administrators get a 5%. These are all calculated on the midpoint of every salary scale. We're not deviating from it. In terms of what that costs, so for teachers, nurses, and librarians, all of those average increases based on the various steps is about $9.5 million. Ancillary and paraprofessionals will see $4.5 million in cost. Administrators, that raise cost us about $2.1 million, and then increasing to a $500 one-time stipend just before Christmas increases it by $3 million. The little bracket on the left is to identify that all of that money is direct pay to the employees. So about 19 million almost is directly going into employees' pockets. You may remember on the earlier slide I told you we're required to do slightly more than 9 million. So obviously we've more than met that requirement. And then to address what you heard from Gallagher. So we've known about it, we have talked about it. We've talked about the fact that we surveyed the employees. They like their plan. They don't want the plan to change, but neither do they want their contributions or their premiums to go up. So what we're doing instead is the district is going to make $4.6 million in contributions to the plan. This won't go through the employees' paychecks, so they're not going to be taxed on it, but it is going into the health plan to preserve the liquidity of it. And so overall, the total proposed compensation plan is about $23.7 million of the 30 going directly to the employees or on their behalf. On the operational side of the budget, we always start with average daily attendance, and we project what we anticipate our revenue to be. And generally speaking, as a declining enrollment district, we anticipate the loss of about 500 students a year. That generally equates to around 265 or so in ADA loss. And so you can see that 2018-19, our projected ADA loss is 100 students. And for 2019-20, we're at 226. So it's a conservative projection, but based on the years before, it's reasonable. It's not too conservative. This is just a pie chart to kind of let you know what we're using or where the money flows. As you can see, almost 85% is in payroll and benefits. So we invest in our people. We do value what they do in the classroom, what they do in their offices, and we want to make sure that they know it. Contracted services, that represents primarily utilities, and about 6% or $10 million a year goes to utilities. General supplies is largely fuel and other things like that. The miscellaneous, the capital outlay, the debt service, the operating transfers, those add up to less than 4% of our annual budget. Our teacher to student ratio, and I should say student to teacher ratio so that the numbers will line up. At the elementary level, it remains 20.5 students per teacher for this year and next year. However, at the middle and high schools, we're going from 23.5 students per teacher to 24 students per teacher. And so this is a summary comparing last year's budget to this year's budget. And you can see right away on the local revenue, we've gone from 89.5 million to 76.9. That's the compression of our tax rate. So the burden has shifted from the local taxpayer to the state. The state revenue is increasing by 41.3, but don't get those confused. If you net the two, what I've lost in my local revenue compared to what the state's making up, there's your 30, okay? And then federal revenue, that's our SHARS and Medicaid, and that's estimated to be 465 because of the large population that we serve. Salaries and benefits, again, 30 million dedicated to employees, a 9.35% increase. The non-salary expenditures are budgeted at $1.5 million less, and that's actually because we paid off some of a qualified school construction bonds from 2010, I believe, and the debt service on that annually was about $1 million to something. And so we paid that off last year. You'll notice that last year we projected a deficit of $1.8 million related to the 0.5% more. I always bring you balance. I understand that you have the ultimate authority and that you can opt to award more. So last year I brought a 1.5 plus the 1% stipend. You asked me to do 2, which meant an adopted budget anticipating we would use 1.8 million of fund balance. I anticipated a balanced budget. Based on our negotiations today, we might use $1.2 million of fund balance to fund all of these additional changes. And then this is the budget that TEA requires us to present. It's the budget by fund and function. We have to adopt these 3 funds, the general fund, the child nutrition fund, and the debt service fund. Our general fund is the main operating fund of the district, and these are the functional categories. We would be adopting a general fund budget of $414.6 million, with child nutrition at $25.6 million and debt service at $35.2 million. Our total all funds budget, if you will, or at least these 3 funds, is $475.5 million. These are things that are in the budget, but which weren't there when we provided it to you in May. So the compensation plan and the district contribution to the health fund together add up to the $23 million we spoke about a moment ago. We anticipate the need for 27 pre-K teachers and aides to accommodate the full-day pre-K at a cost of $2.8 million. We need the 3rd year of the furniture refresh. We're actually a year ahead of schedule, and through this budget, we're able to provide the next round of furniture in the refresh plan. We need $2 million worth of pre-K furniture and the curriculum to go with it. Then our workers' comp fund is also not had an increase in a while, so we are contributing $1.5 million to it. We're doing the next year of the Engage Me student devices to add another grade level. We're putting $1 million back into our buses and white fleet. We had previously removed it just because we were unsure what the budget was going to look like. We've added it in now. And then, as Ms. Valencia mentioned, this is the $550,000 for all of the various UIL, special education, and other stipends that we've worked together to achieve. And so finally, if you approve this budget, then we'll be through with that tomorrow evening after the public hearing. And the final budget action that will take place is the August tax rate and tax value adoption. And we have to wait until August to do that because actually CAD doesn't disseminate certified values until July 25th. So we have to have a budget in place by July 1 when the fiscal year begins, but we don't get tax values till July 25th, so we come back in August with this information. And with that, I can take any questions you might have.
Mr. Ochoa.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate all the hard work you put into this. But we had the pleasure of having Lieutenant Governor Don Patrick address us there at the legislative session. And he spoke about, and this is one of the things I'm still trying to wrap my mind around, is tax compression and the money that Texas is going to provide to alleviate that. He was talking like $5.6 billion that was going to be appropriated to compensate for this tax compression. Can you just give me, he didn't, that's all he said, so I need a little bit of your take on what that means.
Okay, so they had two objectives, in my opinion. One was property tax reform, and one is school finance reform. On districts that are Chapter 42 and Chapter 41, some of those send, so a Midland district, they have a lot of revenue in property tax. And they used to use the example of, you have a glass of funding, and it's based on your ADA. If your property values push your funding out of the cup, all of that excess comes to the state for redistribution to the districts that are not as property rich as you are. So they had the tax compression issue to address, largely to address that. So where our voters actually approved the $1.17 tax rate, but because of the state's efforts and their initiative to reduce property tax values on the local taxpayer and to put the burden back on the state, they just said, we're reducing it, but we'll give you the money to make it up. And that's basically what they've done. That $5 billion is distributed across the state, not only through aid to districts that are not property wealthy, but also in allowing districts that are wealthy to keep more of their local funding. That's a high-level description.
All right, so that's the number you're showing up there?
Yes, so you can see that on local revenue between last year's budget and this year's budget, and that's reflecting my property tax collections, that's going down by $12.6 million because they lowered my tax rate.
But the state revenue is going to provide.
Right, so the state revenue is going up by $41.3 million.
So in fact, we benefited from that?
Well, yes, we're benefiting to the tune of about 30 million, which is in those legislative budget reports that you kept seeing. They're saying you're going to get 30 to 32 million. I don't believe that report took into account all of the changes because they were still trying to measure, and they can't measure my property values. So they're saying statewide, most property values go up by 6.5%. Ours never increase that much. Ours go up by 2.5%, maybe.
Okay, well, thank you very much. When he was talking to us, it was just hard to understand how this was going to work out in our local level when it came down to us in our budget. But putting those figures up there now, I understand. So,
good.
Thank you.
So I have two questions. I know we are losing the high school allotment and the GT, but we obviously have to provide for it. So where does the money come from? And are we cutting anything to be able to afford that? Or are we planning to make up the lost money in those funds?
We're just absorbing it. So where you can see, if you took this 41 minus the 12, it's slightly more than the 29 that we're putting into employee benefits. It's because we are absorbing that. So no positions were cut. Nothing has been eliminated. The entire high school program still operates. We have to provide all of the gifted and talented, or a program, and right now we're continuing with what we have. So we're just absorbing it.
From our fund balance or from?
Just from our operating. So from this budget that we've developed, it's absorbing those losses.
Okay, and then also earlier, obviously, we had the presentation on the healthcare, and he was saying 23%, and I know Dr. Del Torre said that was outrageous, but based on, you're saying we're putting 4.6 million, he's saying we're 9 million. And I agree with him, not that I completely agree, 23% is ridiculous, but we're way off, we're half. He's saying over 9 million, you're saying 4.6 to keep it at where we're at.
Well, so the 4.6 does not make it up, obviously.
Yeah.
However, from their perspective, their job is to basically do the same thing I do. They need to present a conservative picture. If you do nothing at all and medical inflation continues, they're gonna protect themselves. So 9, no, probably 7 to 7.5. So by the influx of 4.6 million, the fund is staying afloat, but undoubtedly So I'm very clear, you have to make changes. We either have to change the plan structure, we have to increase the premiums, or we have to find some way for the district to increase its contribution. And I will tell you that we already, 75% of the health costs are paid by the district. That's unheard of in the market anymore. So something has to give.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Is that it? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Delatorre. We will now discuss agenda items as listed in the posted notice of regular meeting of Ysleta Independent Board of Trustees for June 18th, 2019, and related recommended motions with the superintendent and executive cabinet, and receive responses to questions and/or requests for additional information through the superintendent in preparation for deliberation and action on said items at June 18, 2019 regular Board of Trustees meeting. So we will start with the consent items. So if there's somebody who has a question on something, just stop me as we're going through. So consent item number 1, Board of Trustees canvas. No, it's the minutes of the Board of Trustees canvas election meeting and board workshop, May 13th, 2019. Number 2, Board of Trustees board training, May 13th, 2019. Number 3, Board of Trustees regular meeting, May 15th, 2019. Okay, moving on to number 4, monthly financial update for April 2019. Number 5, 2020 Consensus Bureau resolution. Census Bureau, I'm sorry. Number 6, approval of award of YISD cooperative requisition for the renewal of Microsoft Office 365. Number 7, approval of award of YISD cooperative requisition for the lease purchase of a backup solution.
May I?
Go ahead.
Administration, could I get a reading as to how much it cost for that activity at UTEP?
Oh, we're not at UTEP.
We're not at UTEP yet. We're
It's
on
number 7,
this
wasn't it?
7, but on the consent. Look at this one, Mike. Look at this one, because there's a little confusion about the printed one as compared to this
So
one.
did I jump the circle here? Okay, that's number 9, I'm sorry. I'll wait till number 9.
All right.
Sorry.
Anything for number 7? Okay, number 8, award of amendment number 5 to YISD contract number 200800385 with El Paso Community College.
President Wood, I'd like to abstain on number 8.
So we need to pull that one for a separate motion, please. Okay, number 9, award of YISD contract number 201909197 with University of Texas at El Paso.
Yeah, I just, maybe somebody can
What that
clarify the
is
cost.
with so many school districts using the Don Haskins Center for commencement exercises, they're now requiring us to enter into an agreement over time. They want to lock it in, lock dates in, and so we've relied on the Don Haskins Center for quite some time now. This is just to continue that relationship.
But I'm asking my question is, what is the cost per year?
Oh, what is the cost?
So the cost per day is $1,200. So 3,600, well, 2,400 by the time we use it for 2 days. There's also a $600 per day for rehearsals, but I'm not sure if we use it for rehearsals. I think the schools rehearse at their campuses, and then we only use it for the day
Just
of
Parkland High
graduation.
School is the only one that uses it for her rehearsal.
Okay, so 600 per day for rehearsals, so the most would be 1,800 a day.
All right,
Sorry.
so which is 7, 6? Okay. Okay, thank you, that's what I needed. Thank you.
Okay, number 10, approval of award of YISD contract number 201909199 with the College Board. Number 11, approval of award of YISD contract number 201-90208 with University of Texas at Austin.
I had a question on that.
Go ahead, Mr. Remedes.
Mr. Basuto, Dr. LaTorre, Mr. Basuto and I were talking about on-ramps. And I noticed that 4 of the 7 high schools only take advantage of the UT on-ramp program. How many students are we impacting with this program right now?
I don't have the numbers, but I can have that for you tomorrow morning. I can pull some numbers to take the actual enrollments at each of the high schools.
Okay, and Eastwood, Hanks, and Ysleta have elected, are currently not using the on-ramps based on the information we talked about the other day. Is that the principal's decision, or?
Yes, it is, and it's also regarding who, what they have as far as availability between AP and the dual credit, now UT on-ramp. So now you're basically juggling 3, because some of these courses kind of they're transposed on each other. So you're either gonna do AP, you're either gonna do dual credit through PCC, or you can do UT on-ramps.
Okay.
And so that's where the logistics come into play.
Okay, and, excuse me, and the performance, check that term. The academic success, is it about the same as it is for dual credit, as it is for AP?
It's course completion, because
said
at
no?
the end of the day, the student can actually accept the course. Remember the grade from,
Right.
remember the high school grade is there, but during the May semester, when grades are in, the kids have the opportunity to accept the credit or not through UT. But we can pull completion and see what the percentage of students who took it to how many completed it at the end of the year. Now, we may not have access to how many kids actually took the course per se, unless we were to require the students to turn in transcripts, because that's through UT, the UT system. But we can look at the high school grade and see how many actually completed it from the start to end. I can do that for you.
All right, thank you.
I actually have a question also on this. While we were down at SLI, we actually, Mr. Bustillos and myself, attended a college, a course about dual credit, on-ramps, all of these different programs. And what they were actually saying, and the ladies that were leading this were actual counselors or people that supervise the kids coming in with these kind of programs. And I was actually very shocked to hear, because, we think of these things, our main thing for saying that we're doing this is that it's going to save the kids money. When they get into school, they can come out with associate's degrees, et cetera, et cetera. They were making some pretty big distinctions between the university actually, they can accept the credits, but whether or not they actually apply to their major as being very, it's iffy. And in fact, a lot of them don't really apply. And then they even went so far as to say that when a student reaches 150 credits, say that they have actually changed majors or whatever, that then they have to start paying out-of-state tuition. And so I'm wondering, what I'm asking is, are we giving our kids the kind of counseling they need when it comes to taking on-ramps, taking AP, taking all of the different things that we're offering? Because to me, they were talking about plans for that you actually get the degree plan from different universities that these kids are going to, so that they can actually see what's that kind of thing. Do we do anything to help these kids choose between these programs? And because the last thing you want to do is go to all these school, get all these credits, and then your last semester you've got 150 hours and you can't, or 150 credits, and you can't.
So
Yeah.
to answer your question,
I'm
Ms.
sorry, it
Woodruff,
was
the
a
answer
long
is
one.
yes, it is, but it's actually a valid one, and then the answer is yes. So several years back, legislature was realizing that dual credit was being offered predominantly for many things, and they weren't necessarily aligned. What you were speaking to was the degree plan. And so what we've done is we offer courses that fall in within the degree plan. And I know Mr. Ramirez and I had that discussion because for that very reason, you don't want kids to be taking dual credit courses that are outside of that degree plan. They accumulate all these hours and then they don't apply them once they leave. And so pretty much the coursework, if you notice, even on the Valle Verde MOU, there is an actual side-by-side where you can see what the high school and whether or not it applies for the associate's degree plan. So the answer is yes, because we don't want them to pick up excessive credits that are not going to apply towards the degree plan.
Thank you.
Also, Ms. Woodruff, you actually can, the state has actually regulated where students who are not at an early college should only be taking core curriculum that's related to dual credit. So it limits it where it should transfer
okay,
across the board to
okay.
almost every state, university or college. So they're really regulated. In fact, like for example, a class like English 4, most EPCCs won't let you actually take English 4 as a high school credit because it's not a 4-year. So they won't let you do it as a dual credit class. So it's really been regulated because you're right, so many students were actually taking it. The difference between on-ramps and dual credit though is that you don't have to pass the TSI to actually take an on-ramps class, and you don't have to accept the college credit. So for example, a student who's struggling in a college level class, and then they realize, oh my God, I'm going to take a C or a D, and that's just going to be my official college transcript. Well, in dual credit, you're stuck with that grade, no matter what. If you get an F, you're stuck with that grade, or you withdraw. And on-ramps, you can finish the course, as Mr. Bustillos was saying, and take your high school credit, but you don't ever have to accept the college credit. So that's the benefit of on-ramps that the dual credit doesn't offer.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
And so just to kind of put your mind at ease, Ms. Woodruff, is essentially that narrative was for us 2 years ago.
Okay.
We were having that
So
discussion.
we're behind.
Oh, no, we're ahead.
Sorry.
We're ahead.
I mean,
So-
I'm behind.
No,
with that.
because that is a narrative across the state, but we got a hold of that 2 years ago and we started already filling it down, so yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Go ahead, Mr.
I'd also like to add,
Ramirez.
to talk about that concern about making sure our students are making wise choices and our counselors and teachers are guiding the students. Earlier this month, EPCC and UTEP hosted a dual credit early college convening at the EPCC. And while it was not heavily attended, there was a huge group from Parkland High School, which I was very pleased to see in attendance there, especially considering it was right about school ending. But we had a huge discussion, especially when we started visiting with our UTEP partners and the high school teachers, talking about how to guide the students and how to get ready for things. And so, because even though Mr. Basuto so eloquently explained it, if these kids, they change their majors, from the time they leave high school to the time they get over to the university, they get to the college. And so they have different challenges. But what they want to do is help them make more informed decisions about, okay, if you're even thinking about doing this, then you need to take this type of math. And so I was very pleased to see we had, like I said, the high school community was well represented, the early college community was well represented, and both EPCC and UTEP did an excellent job in presenting that.
Great. Thank you. All right, moving on to consent item number 12, approval for award of YISD contract number 201-90210 with One Government Procurement Alliance. 13, approval of award of YISD contract number 201-90217 with Region 17. 14, approval of award of YISD contract number 201-90223 with El Paso Independent School District. We'll go on to our policy action items. Policy action item number 1, policy CH local purchasing and acquisition. Ms. Lucetto, and then we'll go with Mr. Ochoa.
I would like to know what amounts triggers this, and what are we talking about as far as budget purchase items, contract amendments? What are we talking about? What type? It was on.
She is.
Hello.
Can you repeat it?
I would like to know what amount triggers this, the increased amount, because it doesn't say. And then what type of items are we talking about when it's, what type of contracts and the amendments, what are we looking at?
So primarily, the purpose for this action right now is that we have to acquire furniture and curriculum and things that we weren't sure we were going to have to obtain, and we've got to do it in July, and we don't have a board meeting. So for pre-K, we can't get the furniture ordered and the furniture refreshed because we just learned about the funding, so if I don't have the authority, I can't make the acquisitions next month. I think, Mrs. Austin, do you know the thresholds that were set by the policy off the top of your head? I know that 250,000 has always been done administratively, but without pulling it up in front of me, do you know, Ms. Austin, off the top of your head?
So what this does is we have the way the policy stands right now, anything up to $250,000 can be done administratively. This would take that cap off. And so if it's budgeted and you have already budgeted for it, then the superintendent would have the authority to, following after the procurement process is done, and we're making no changes to the procurement requirements, then the superintendent could approve that award, that purchase, that contract.
That's very similar to the way other administrative bodies like this work, where you saw the detail that we put into the budget presentation, so therefore, if it's in the budget and it's been appropriated, we have administratively the authority to go ahead with the purchase.
So we're not talking about anything that's like supplemental insurances or things like that. We're simply talking about things that you can pick up and put down.
Yeah, bond projects, change orders, things that, where there's some sense of urgency to get it done, otherwise it would, we wouldn't adhere to the timeline. No insurance policies, nothing like that.
One thing that this policy does carve out from that delegation to the superintendent is contracts and purchases regarding employee benefits over 250,000. So before we would make any change to our healthcare provider or our plan provider, we left that in the boards because that's a really unusual thing. That's not day-to-day business. So we expressly kept that in the boards. That would need board approval. But other things that really is the business that happens all the time, it's not something that happens just once every 3 years or something, that we're asking for that authority to be delegated to the superintendent because there's so many ways we need to keep that flowing. And also you all hear about it. There's a lot of reporting and approvals that you've already given through the budgetary process. And for example, when you approve the bond projects, you know how much is going to each project.
And I think it reads that at the next regular meeting of the board, we would make you aware of any purchase.
That's for the
one below.
The other one, not for this one. It's number 3 that says
Correct.
that.
CH and CV really go together.
Mm-hmm.
So are we discussing that one now too, or do you want to wait till we get there? Because I think.
I'm happy to answer any questions on CV.
Go ahead, Mr. Ochoa.
If you'd like.
Oh, okay.
I'm happy to.
So thanks. The facilities construction and these change orders is the ones that really caught my attention. And that was because we went to this last conference, and there was some talk about construction where, I don't think it's happened here, where it's a competitive bid, and maybe 2 of them are competing. One goes high, one goes low, and of course the one that's low gets it, but then they subcontract to the guy that was high. And then the thing that warned us about is to watch those change orders, because those change orders can become very costly in the long run. It'll cost you more in the long run because they've done that. So I know that we're making this change and delegating the authority to the superintendent. What safeguards are there in place to make sure that that doesn't happen?
Probably not.
Well, you can't, by law, we can't have change orders for a construction contract that goes over 25% of the value. That's one cap on that. Let me just pull the resolution.
I just want to make sure that we have some oversight over this, and I know the superintendent, but his plate is pretty full, and I don't think he's going to,
Well, and also on top of that, when you're talking about construction and contracts, we answer to the public. I
Right.
mean, that to me is the main thing with that one is, we're the ones at the neighborhood association meetings that the public's questioning us. Why did you do this, or why, how much are you spending on that? And so that's another thing to consider with that. Go ahead, Mr. Ramirez.
I'm not adverse to CH, but I'll go with the consensus of the board. I have a grave concern about number 3, CV, policy CV. And I think the big part of this is that, Dr. Del Torre and his team, they do all the heavy lifting on everything. But, as the trustees, we took responsibility for this bond. We took responsibility that things were going to happen the way they were supposed to happen. And we can't be accountable if we're hearing about it after the fact. And so I think that, at least for me, I've got to be accountable to the folks out there, to the taxpayers and to the community. And so this has nothing to do with Dr. Del Torre and the team. This has to do with, it's our responsibility. We signed on for this, and we shouldn't give that away. I think we should hang on to that for a while.
To understand, we aren't talking about new construction projects, correct? We're talking about the current ones that we have?
No, it's
Or
talking
this'll be
about,
all and any?
it's talking about everything. Approving new contracts is what it's talking about in policy CV, facilities construction.
And so the only way it would trigger this policy for us to get the communication if it's over 50,000?
No, it wouldn't.
It's-
No, it says
It does say-
only,
All
well,
construction
no,
awards
but
contract.
it would still be approved, but he would have to
But
report
that's when
on.
that's when it would trigger the report.
Yeah, that's true.
So if I'm, excuse me, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So with regard to change orders, we have actually a very intensive review process. And so let me address that just quickly. So generally speaking, the program manager and our internal project managers have to give directive to execute a change order. The contractor can't just come back to us and say, oh, you need this, you've got to have it. It goes through VLK, who first says we disagree or we agree. It goes through the architect, who's got to recommend it. And if the architect says, no, we don't agree, then generally speaking, we just say flat out no. So architect first. Then the contractor may propose it. The architect's going to review it. Then it comes to VLK. If VLK has reviewed it and agrees with it, then it comes to the internal project manager. If our internal project manager and facilities and construction disagree with it, it's not going to get done. And so then we actually get a change proposal to review, and we go through that, and our contracts specifically say that you must substantiate materials, you must substantiate labor, and we compare it to prevailing wage, and then you're only allowed 14% maximum for overhead and profit. So we have very strict provisions governing all change orders, and they're not going to get through without going through that 5-step process review.
So in delegating this authority, what is the goal?
I think particularly as we're going into the summer, we have projects that we are hoping to get done before school starts. So one of those, for example, is, and you'll like this one, it is a job order contract to rehabilitate the bathrooms at Hanks High School. It needs to be done, but it's got to be, that normally would have to come back to the board.
Come back to us.
This is something the superintendent could administratively approve. Now, keep in mind, as Ms. Austin said, we are never circumventing procurement processes. So what the law says we have to do, we do. So a job order contract has been competitively bid either through Region 19, the city, or someone else. So we adhere to all procurement law, all procurement policies, but we're just administratively saying the superintendent has the authority to execute that contract, and because it will be over 50,000 in August, you will get a report saying, we've approved a job order contract for rehabilitation or renovation of the bathrooms at Hanks High School. It was awarded to such and such a vendor. Here's what we spent.
And one other reason to do it is also time. As you can imagine, by publication and the solicitation, those things take 5 weeks, 7 weeks, 9 weeks. It takes a long time. And then if it falls outside the period, and if we have to wait for another, 3.5 to 4 weeks at the outside for board approval, that just adds time. And as
But-
you all know, time is money.
But Ms. Austin,
Time
even
is
with
money.
that, with the projects that,
No, please.
with the projects that are in the pipeline, there, at least we can get some type of board communication. If we're going to decide to do this, let's say, okay, we have these projects in the pipeline, these projects are out to bid, this is what we anticipate. Maybe that would ease some of the uncomfortableness.
Sure, and the other thing we talked about is that these have to be budgeted. So should we have another bond issue? And, you all can be very granular if you need to be on that budget. So in other words, you might be very particular about budgets for certain projects. For example, construction costs versus soft costs on a particular project.
With regard to bond projects, if you recall, when the 2015 bond was approved in May of 2016, we brought to you a report that clearly outlined every campus and the type of money that was going to be allocated to that campus. That's an example of the budget we're working within. So if at Hanks High School, their athletic enhancements were going to exceed the amount of the budget, it has to come back. But if the athletic enhancements could be done within that budgeted amount and it was competitively awarded, the superintendent could just execute the contract. You would still get a report on it, but because it was within that function, within that campus, within that budgeted allocation, it moves forward.
Is there a way we could change the consent item, where instead of saying at the next regular board meeting, in a board communication as Ms.
Of course.
Absolutely.
Lucero was saying, I think that would probably make a lot easier for most of us to not have to wait 3 or 4 weeks until we hear about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
And not at all. And
Do you want to speak, Mr. Rosales?
I think the mere fact that we've gone through $431 million and the amount of change orders that we actually approved were minimal in comparison to the large amount of dollars. I think the mechanisms that Ms. Leeper just explained are there in place. In addition to that, the review process for selecting contractors is rigid. So, I understand where you're coming from. I remember a friend of mine mentioned to me when the bond was passed, he said, "You better be careful on those change orders. This is how I got rich." And those things they're common, but he didn't understand that we have a process in place to prevent and preclude. It would be nice to kind of know what some of the pending projects would be, and I agree with that. But as far as the mechanisms and the experience that we've had, and I think we learned a great deal from this $431 million expenditure we just finished. So,
And I thank you, Mr. Rosales, but in my part, I just wanted to know what mechanisms there were. And now I feel more assured that there are in place, that it's not just something that we are going to make a change order just for the sake of it. It's going to go through a lot of scrutinization. It's going to go through a lot of approval levels. And that's all I wanted to hear, because like Connie and Soltero said, we are ultimately responsible to our constituents for how our money is spent. I mean, we're all taxpayers here, so we just want to make sure that that is all properly done, which it is, and I'm glad to hear that. And that was my question. That's the only why I was asking questions on that.
So on this one, as far as the policy action items, those will be considered in a group, or are we considering those one by one?
It'll be in a group.
In a group, so
Unless you want to pull it.
if we want to pull one of them, Mr. Ramirez wants to pull policy number CV Number 3.
Okay.
Well,
You don't have to approve them all in a group. You can approve them one by one.
do we want to do it one by one then? Okay, instead of pulling it, then they prefer just to do it one by one.
And
And that's fine.
If I heard you,
It still achieves the same purpose, so.
did I hear that you might want me to change the language on CV about reporting to the board?
Yes,
So there's a line in the first paragraph that says the superintendent shall report all such awarded contracts over $50,000 in value in a board communication. Would you like that instead of at the next regular board meeting?
that would be fine, but I think you need to define when that would come out too.
Within 10 business days?
I would prefer both. Board
And-
communication goes to the
Okay.
board, and when they report it to the board, it's publicly known also, so.
Just concurrent to the signature, is what it comes down. Signing a change order and then.
Sorry.
So what we can do is just concurrent. So when I sign a change order that exceeds the $50,000, I would concurrently write a BC, make a copy of the change order, send it electronically out to the board, and make myself available to answer any questions.
Or a contract,
Or a contract.
or a contract.
Yeah, I don't anticipate it happening too often.
All right, so we need to go back to policy number 2. If there's any discussion on policy CI, local school properties disposal.
I just think
Go ahead.
that's a great idea. We have so many resources that for some reason become outdated, I think, but they can be utilized by other entities instead of just throwing them away. So I think it's a great policy to do that.
Okay, then I'll read again, policy CV, local facilities construction. And then policy 4, EIC, local academic achievement ranking. I want to say on that one, I was glad for the clarification on that one because people were actually asking me, how does that work? So I couldn't explain it. I appreciate the clarification on that one. Okay. Okay, so now we are at number 4. We will now elect board officers, and the newly elected officers will take. They were left off. Do we want to do them? Do you guys want to do action items? We can go on to the action items if you'd like to do that. They weren't on this, but we'll do the action items. I actually have some questions too. Yeah. All right. So action item number 1, adopt 2019-20 official budget. I think we had those questions answered pretty much. Number 2, donation to Eastwood Heights Elementary School. Number 3, approve the internal audit plan for 2019-20. Number 4, approval of superintendent award of YISD cooperative requisitions for the purchase of student devices. Number 5, approval of award of YISD solicitation number BD 1901 RFQ Program Management Services 2019 bond, and Mr. Ramirez has a question.
My question is, have we gone back and changed any of the terms of that contract, or is it just changing the dates and that sort of thing?
No, I think Ms. Austin has almost completely rewritten the terms and conditions of that contract to protect the district from any vulnerabilities, I guess, that the previous contract carried with it. Do you want to just, in general, share some of those things, or?
Sure, I think we highlighted some of them in a BC, but basically, Ms. Morris, our Houston construction attorney, also worked on the contract, but specifically, they're adding some staffing, they're adding some reporting mechanisms. We also, I think we have a 5% of each project-related fee to the program manager is being reserved, and it'll only be paid out in full if the project is completed on time. So that's one little thing. So there's a more investment in it. So there were several things that changed in the contract, and those were the major things.
Okay, and that was one of the big ones, was more
Yeah.
aggressive at reporting
Yes,
responsibilities.
most definitely.
Thank you.
Any other questions on that? Okay, now we'll go back to where we were at. We will now elect board officers, and the newly elected officers will take order at the next regular board meeting, Tuesday, June 18th, 2019. Following board operating procedures, trustees have been informed of members who have expressed interest in serving in one or more office. This is simply an expression of interest. It does not restrict who can be nominated or elected. Unless there is an objection, I, as president, propose that we follow the procedure set out in Robert's Rule of Order, newly revised on page 439, lines 5 through 35, and page 440, lines 1 through 18, and use a non-secret paper ballot for voting, starting with election for president. Will take as nominated anyone who expressed interest for an office, and will also take nominations from the floor. If any trustee can vote for any nominee, including himself or herself. After the ballots are collected, Ms. Matheson will read the ballot cast by each trustee. If there is a majority vote, I will declare that person elected. If there's no majority, balloting will be repeated for that office until there is a majority for a single person. Is there any objection? Okay. No, the check mark just indicates who showed interest. You're going to circle. You circle the name that you choose. Okay. All right. So, for the hearing none, we will proceed as proposed. For the office of president, based on who has submitted interest, we have nominations for Trustee Ramirez, Trustee Rosales, and Trustee Ochoa. Are there any further nominations? Okay. Ballots have been passed out. Please mark your ballot with your name as the voter, and then the name of the nominee you're voting on. When you're done, Ms. Matheson will collect your ballots.
Do we have to put anything for ballot number at the top?
It says on there for the office of.
No, at the very top, it says ballot number and then,
You can put one if you
You
want.
can put one,
oh, okay. Thank you.
since this is the first one, I guess.
President Woodruff?
Yes.
Okay, the results are, Mr. Trustee Ramirez voted for Sotero Ramirez. Connie Woodruff voted for Cruz Ochoa. Mike Rosales voted for Mike Rosales. Catherine Lucero voted for Cruz Ochoa. Cruz Ochoa voted for Cruz Ochoa. Carlos Bustillos voted for Cruz Ochoa. Richard Cudier voted for Cruz Ochoa.
There is a majority of the vote for Cruz Ochoa. That's 5 votes for him. I declare Cruz Ochoa elected as president. Congratulations. All right, moving on to Vice President. For the office of Vice President, based on who has submitted interest, we have a nomination for Trustee Cudier. Are there any other nominations? All right. Ballots have been passed out with the name of the trustees. Please mark your ballot with the name as the voter and the name of the nominee you're voting for. When you're done, Ms. Matheson will collect your ballots.
Excuse me, Ms. Woodruff? If
Yes.
there's only one nominee, you can skip this.
Okay.
Step.
So I guess, well, let's go ahead and vote. Let's go ahead. I already called it, so yeah, go ahead and do it. There you go.
President Woodruff,
Yes.
we have unanimous for Richard Cudier.
Okay. So we have unanimous for Richard Cudier. I declare Richard Cudier elected as Vice President. Congratulations. For the office of Secretary, based on who has submitted interest, we have a nomination for Trustee Lucero. Are there any further nominations? Okay, ballots have been passed out with the name of the nominees. Do we want to mark the ballots? Let's do it then, okay. Please mark your ballot with your name as the voter and then the name of the nominee you're voting for. When you are done, Ms. Matheson will collect your ballots. You don't have that one?
President Woodruff, we have
Yes.
unanimous for Catherine Lucero.
Okay. We have a unanimous decision for Catherine Lucero for secretary. I declare Catherine Lucero elected as secretary. Congratulations. So, we will now recess the board to convene the same group as trustees, as the trustees also serve as the district's public facility corporation. This board of directors must be maintained due to the lease purchase of certain properties within the district as set up years ago. So we recess and call it back to order. Yes, all right. I call to order the YISD Public Facility Corporation Board of Directors to order with the following directors present: Mr. Rosales, Mr. Jimenez, Mr. Cuder, Mr. Ochoa, Ms. Lucero, Mr. Bustillos, and myself, Mrs. Woodruff. Action item number 1, elect officers for the YISD Public Facility Corporation Board of Directors. Is there any discussion? If there's no further discussion, may I have a motion?
I move to approve as elected officers of the Public Facility Corporation Board, the same persons elected to serve as officers of the Board of Trustees of the Ysleta Independent School District.
May I have a second? Okay, we have a second from Mr. Ochoa. We don't have electronic votes, so we're going to do it by a show of hands. If you're voting in favor, please raise your hand. Okay. And that is, results are 7-0. 7 in favor, 0 opposed. If there's no further discussion, I move to adjourn the PFC meeting. Can somebody?
I move to adjourn.
Thank you. Okay, then may I have a motion to adjourn the board workshop?
I move to adjourn the board workshop.
All right, we're done.
It's so weird.